One of my earliest memories as a kid was at the Liberty Science Museum. I remember these tactile experiencing, taking things apart, putting them back together, seeing how they work. And these experiences sort of shaped how I interact with the world. I would be found playing with things all the time, sometimes being distracted, taking things apart, sometimes even taking things to the point where I'd set them on fire just to see what happened. And I remember my mom would always say, "Jasper, how do we take your destructive nature and make it constructive?" Funny enough, that's what led me to being a chef, which is where I could catch something on fire for a living. I spent the next 2 years engrossing myself in everything food. I would go to culinary school. I'd learn all these different techniques, different flavors, but I couldn't help but feel like a fundamental piece was missing. It's where my food came from. And so I learned about monocultures, soil depletion, and how the soil is actually losing its nutritional value, and that's translating to the food. I wanted to get closer to the source, and I found this beautiful spot, this community garden right in front of my house. And every time I went to that garden, something magical would happen. Whether it was a story we would exchange, or a recipe, or just something shared within the community. And it was there that I realized we could sort of repair the fabric. We wouldn't necessarily be fixing the monoculture, but we were fixing our tiny little corner. I remember this one pivotal moment for me, where I was teaching this dumping class. We were using spring onions that I had planted earlier on in the spring. And I remember this one moment where this kid pulled the spring onion out of the ground, and they held it so far away from themselves, like it was radioactive, like it was going to take a bite out of them. And it was there that I realized there was this huge disconnect from the food and where it came from. And once I started pulling on that thread, I noticed that it went much deeper than taste.
Because when we talk about food, we have to talk about the system behind the food. Because not only is it that people are disconnected from the food that they eat, it is the food itself that is disconnected from the nature it is a part of and where it comes from. You see, in monoculture, you repetitively plant the same crop over and over again. It's not part of an ecosystem, it is an eco-isolation. And in nature, when you isolate something and you repetitively plant it, it becomes destructive. Because an ecosystem thrives on variety and diversity, and monoculture is the complete opposite. Now, I'm an environmental artist, so I always try to portray these things, visualize these things, and I did it with vinyl record players. Now, this will make sense when I explain. Because what I did is I put the sculptures of crops on these record players, but I scratched all of them. So the needle is constantly stuck in the same groove, playing the same fragment over and over again. So it's now no longer playing the full symphony, its full capability. It is now reduced to only a fragment of its capability. And the longer it is doing this, the more it's scratching into the groove that was there, destroying the music waves of that record until it turns to dust. And this is what monoculture ultimately does. The longer you do this repetition, you create fertile soil into dust.
So eventually I moved to the Netherlands, and I was super happy. I started working for a corporation, but they were more obsessed with speed and profit and less about nutritional value and where the food comes from. I felt, again, stuck in this rut, similar to this record player, getting stuck in repeat. And I no longer had that beautiful community garden right in front of my house, so I could connect back with nature. And so I started to think, how can I get back to nature? So I started small. There's a small little plot of land right in front of my house that was collecting garbage, and I decided to guerrilla garden it. My friend actually taught me this incredible technique of working with willows, which I encourage you all to try this out. You just take a stick in the spring or fall, and you put it in the ground, and it actually becomes a whole new tree. Now, we took that idea one step further and decided to create this sort of green gazebo, a place for people to reconnect with nature. And while building it, we noticed there was this immediate synergy of the community around us, People would stop, they would come by. Some people would even join in and help us build the structure. Even while building, there was a bartender who came by and offered us beers while we were building. It was magical. And we realized that this was something that was missing in an urban environment. It wasn't long before we started building these structures all over Amsterdam. And I posted a video online, and funny enough, that's how I met Theo.
Because when I saw this video, I saw the backdrop and I was like, that's Amsterdam, that's the city that I come from. So I take a shot and I contacted you and you said, let's meet up. So we met up at the Willow Dome. We talked about our shared passion for the environment and we immediately hit it off. So much so that we decided to join forces and actually start planting willows together. And why willows? Because they're amazing. And I'm going to tell you why. Because willows are biodiversity enhancers. Wherever they are planted, they host lives for hundreds of species of birds and insects. And they're native to the Netherlands too, which is interesting. But they're not just amazing above ground, they're amazing below ground as well. Because they form a very special connection to the mycelial network that is in the soil, which is the fungi network that connects all plants and trees through this system. And it's small trees, big trees, doesn't matter. The system is connected through this mycelial network. And then I thought, this is actually kind of how we do things as well. We are different people, but we connected anyways, and now are collaborating. So we decided to call it what it is, the mycelial network of people.
One day, I got approached by just some random person who saw my work. He had a tree that was cut down in his neighborhood. And he called us to come and plant something there, to give that place meaning again. And so we came like the A-team with willows in hand and came down and decided to start planting this structure to replace something that was already there. And now while building, another neighbor came up and offered us coffee. Now little did we know how important that neighbor was actually going to become.
Because that neighbor that offered us coffee was going to play a major role in a film that I was producing at the time. I was making a film about environmental tipping points. And these are ecosystems that keep the world intact, like ocean currents, the polar caps, the Amazon rainforest. But they're under so much pressure that they're on the verge of breaking. And once they break, they're gone. And I thought, okay, what else breaks when you put too much pressure on it? A musical instrument. If you put too much pressure on a string, it will snap, and you lose the ability to play music to its fullest. So I created a film with a string quartet of children that are playing a music piece, and their 16 strings represent the 16 ecosystems. But I needed somebody to represent the evil that is destroying the environment. And I wanted it to be a dancer specifically, because I wanted to show how these people dance around the responsibility whilst they're destroying the environment. And when I asked that man that gave us the coffee, what is it that you do? He said, I'm a dancer. And I said, would you like to be in my film? And he said, I would be honored. And then he played a magnificent role breaking all the strings.
He's actually a really nice guy.
Yeah, and he's a gardener, which makes it even more funny. And this is just another example of how a person was given to us through this mycelial network. And I'll give you another example. I'm also part of Eco-Justice, and we're busy with environmental law. And I went to the municipality of Utrecht because their municipality was going to sign our manifesto on ecocide law. And then I met the head ecologist of that city. And we also, again, after the ceremony, we talked. We connected about the environment. And when I said about the things that we were doing with the willows, she was immediately excited. And she said, I want to collaborate. So we formed a plan to build a giant willow dome in the city of Utrecht.
And now for a project this big, we needed more volunteers. And so I put out an open call to try and get some people involved in the project. And before we knew it, we had 10 or 15 people showing up every day to complete this project. And it was incredible. It was almost like we were building a small little village. Something really special was created there. And it went beyond us. These people started to collaborate together and do projects without us even being involved. We were strengthening this connection. And we realized that when you build something living together, strangers don't stay strangers.
Because the same way that willows kickstart the soil and kickstart the biodiversity around it, it so did it for us with our story. If Jasper didn't start planting and put a video online for me to interact with, and then we met up, we wouldn't have joined forces. And if we hadn't joined forces, we wouldn't have done this project, and we wouldn't have built the community that we have today. And that's ultimately what it is about, is that in the environment, you need diversity and variety to thrive. And it may not be revolutionary what we're doing, but it's revolutionary in a more quiet way, less like we think of innovation, which is about talking to your neighbor, joining in on a project, offering them coffee. And that is how you make a simple yet radical choice to be part of each other's lives.
And when we're brave enough to decide to interact with each other, to take that leap of faith, strangers don't stay strangers. And it's something innately human. Because as humans, we aren't supposed to do this alone. We're supposed to do it together.